Okay, so we're going to finish up Bereshit Parakeh. We are up to the very last of the 8 aspects of Chesed that the Talmud Devorah discusses. And the last one, which is also said every day in davening, is Havas Shalom Bein Adam L'Chaverei, bringing peace and reconciliation between a person and his friend. Havas Shalom Bein Adam L'Chaverei. Like Aaron HaKohen is praised as an Ohev Shalom, Breitowitz Shalom, a lover of peace, a pursuer of peace, Ohev HaSabriyos, one who loved all of Hashem's creations, Umakarvan L'Torah, and he brought them near to Torah. So Memela, if you can be a person that is an instrument of bringing Shalom, Bein Adam L'Chaverei, so that's a tremendous thing, and that's a form of Chesed that brings Shalom into the world, and that brings HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shalom. So, again, consistent with the idea that everything is interrelated to the Sfiros, the Ramak basically says the notion of Shalom generally is the harmonization of opposite forces. That when you take opposite forces that are normally moving in opposite directions, and you integrate them, you balance them, you synthesize them, you harmonize them, so that each one contributes to the whole in a way that's greater than the sum of the parts. That is the meaning of Shalom. This is what Shalom Bayis is. The Shalom of a husband and a wife is not the obliteration of differences. Men and women are very different, but it's the notion of incorporating each Maila and creating something greater out of the harmonization and the balance and the synthesis. We say at the end of Kaddish, at the end of Shmona Esrei, Oseh Shalom B'mreimav. Hashem makes Shalom in his heavens. So the Meforshim explain that Mreimav is, of course, a synonym for Shamayim, the heavens. Shamayim is an acronym of Eish Umayim. In ways we don't fully understand, the spiritual essence of Shamayim is the combination of fire and water. Fire and water are opposites, right? If there's more water, the water puts out the fire, or the other way around. If the fire is very, very big, it can cause the water to evaporate and boil away. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu somehow is able to synthesize the Koyach HaEish and the Koyach HaMayim to create Shamayim. So Oseh Shalom B'mreimav is the reconciliation of Eish and Mayim in order to create Shamayim. So the same thing, any type of Shalom between the Sfiros is that the opposite forces should be balanced and synthesized. So the idea is Chesed, Devorah, because each might have a tendency to be in excess and be out of whack. Now let me just remind you, a long time ago, I guess most of you weren't even here, but it was last year, we were learning the Hakdama of the Rambam to Pirkei Avos. That is called the Shmeina Prakim, the 8 chapters. This is an example of a Hakdama having more chapters than the book. Pirkei Avos is 5 chapters of Mishnah, and the 6th chapter is a Brisa, actually, it's not part of the Mishnah. The Rambam's Hakdama to Pirkei Avos is Shmona Prakim. He had 8 chapters as a Hakdama to Pirkei Avos. And if you remember, the Rambam actually described the development of midos, the development of an ethical personality, as balancing opposite tendencies, right? This is the famous thesis of the Rambam, that one should seek a path of moderation in life. So you may have an impulse to give, but give could be destructive. You're not going to take care of yourself. You're not going to take care of your family. So you have to have a certain instinct of self-preservation. I got to be sure I don't drop dead of starvation or whatever it is. On the other hand, if I go to the extreme of just caring about myself, then I become a cruel, selfish, egotistical person. So as a result, I have to incorporate within my personality the idea of myself and the idea of the others and balance it in an appropriate way. Actually, Hillel said it in Pirkei Avos as well. Imein ani li, if I don't care for me, mili, who's going to care for me? And if I only care about myself, ma ani, What am I? What type of person am I if I only care about myself? So a person in life has to always balance what you might call the selfish needs of my own self-preservation, which includes things like sanity as well. It's not just eating, drinking, and sleeping, but the idea that you need to make time for yourself. This is a big issue always in life, as well as the imperative of giving to others. So everything is about balance, synthesis, harmonizing opposites. Hillel said it. The Rambam in the Shemona Perakim used a medical analogy. The Rambam was, of course, a doctor. That disease comes from an imbalance of one part of the body. You used to have the four fluids, etc., bile and white fluid, etc. Too much of one causes depression, too much of the other causes manic. And disease comes when there's imbalance. Similarly, a chisaron in your midos comes when there's an imbalance in your midos. And therefore the Rambam says, the same way that when there's a physical imbalance, you have to go to a doctor. When there's a spiritual imbalance, you need to go to a spiritual doctor. And these are the chachamim who understand the koach of the nefesh, etc. So the Rambam actually looked at bad midos as kind of a disease of the soul, a choli hanefesh, when a certain aspect predominates. Now that's true within me as a single human being, but in terms of the Sfiros, this is also a cosmic, not even global, but a universal idea that there are different kochos and different lights and different hashpa'ot that Hashem brings into the world, and they can run in opposite directions. And hava'as shalom bein adam lechavero are the different Sfiros, is that they operate in balance, so that the chesed is balanced with the gevura and the structure of gevura, and then it becomes a davar shalom. So your kavana, when you bring peace between Reuven and Shimon, is that you want there to be a harmonization in the different forces of the Sfiros, so that they have an optimal mix that produces the greatest level of joy and success and hatzlacha and closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, as we said many, many times, chesed is not enough. You don't want only chesed in the world. There are reasons why there are other spheros around to modify, contain, to boundary, to structure. That's needed. Otherwise, I could not exist as an individual. The light would be too bright for me to absorb. I would simply die. I would simply lose my individuality. So therefore, the last of the 8 chasadim, havas shalom bein adam lechaverei, is the notion of integration, balance, harmony, synthesis, in which you don't allow anything to predominate over the other, so everything exists in a certain harmonization, right? That is the shlemus. Again, I understand the theological problem that it's almost as if God is a machine and we're pushing buttons and pulling levers and doing all sorts of things, so the machine is going to operate well, and sometimes the machine malfunctions. I mean, how can one talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu in such a mechanical way, right? It's perhaps even semi-blasphemous to look at God as this machine that you got to fix the buttons and do maintenance on and get in the plumbing staff and connect the pipes, coupled with the sexual union metaphor. We're using two different mishalim at the same time. But once again, the basic idea is that what Rav Chaim Volozhiner says in the Nefesh HaChaim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did create a so-called, I hate even to use the word, a delivery system that very much depends on our Torah, on our mitzvot, on our kavanos, on our thoughts, on our speech, on our deeds. This is the system Hashem created. Hashem created a system where the shefa of divine flow is connected to the way we live our lives. That's a tremendous power the human being has. Rav Chaim Volozhiner says that's the basic idea of man in the image of God. In the sense, kaviyachol, in the sense that we control God. Again, only because God has chosen that system, meaning God was not forced into that system. That would have been a deficiency. But that is the system God chose because he wanted us to be the ones who open up the pipelines. And Rav Chaim Volozhiner says that's the meaning of the verse. Tanu oz le'elokim, give strength to God. He says beferish, we give that koach to Hashem to be able to be mashpia. A tremendous thing. This is a godly function. We open up the tzinor. And therefore, when we talk about this kind of mechanical idea of clearing the pipes and joining them together and creating the right mixes of this and that and that and that and that, hava shalom b'nam l'chaverei, this is indeed the system that Hashem created. He could have created a different system. He could have chosen a different system. And as I've said already enough times, the ultimate source of ratzon is very elusive, meaning, why did God want it this way? Okay, I don't know. You're going to hit a wall, but this is the ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So again, I have to make this point over and over again. This does not imply weakness or deficiency or chisaron within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because every single aspect of our controlling Hashem on some level is Hashem's decision that is the system He wanted. So as a result, it's not an issue of Hashem not having any ability or yichud. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I had this question a few days ago as well, last week. So it seems that somehow man has obviously because Hashem set it up, that it has some kind of effect.
Yep.
A lot of times nowadays, it always kind of bothers me when people something a tragedy happens, and then some of the button will come out, or people will be saying in the Jewish community that this terrible thing happened because of lashon hara, this happened because of that. I always kind of feel like you don't know exactly what happened, and what are we to say? So is there what to say that when I don't know, obviously when we're to say it maybe, but if it's just around the Jewish world, people are saying yeah, it's because of lashon hara, or yeah, it's because of.
Yeah, no. So I mean, I agree with you. Meaning, it's one thing to teach as a general idea of Torah that our actions have consequences, but it's another thing to try to get so specific that you link a specific event to a specific action. That requires a navi. That is why there were prophets in the olden days.
This is a distasteful thing, but I just want to.
Yeah, we shouldn't. We really shouldn't go there that much, especially when it's always somebody else's avera. This is the problem. The tragedy happens, so my reaction is that's because of what they do, whoever the they does. Meaning they're not tznius, or they don't keep Shabbos, or once you start pointing the fingers, we could point it out. Maybe it's because of the way we, behave towards chayolim. All I'm saying is that's an endless game that can go around and around and around and around, and sometimes it's an excuse for real cheshbon nefesh and real introspection. So I think we should avoid being very, very specific on things because we just don't know. But it is very, very true. Do you understand this? The Kabbalistic system, if you had to summarize what does Kabbalah do for us, so to speak, and on a practical level, the one sentence is, it reminds us or teaches us the immensity of the power of our actions. That's the one thing. You see, without this type of orientation, you might have looked at mitzvos and averos as kind of transactional, meaning I do my mitzvos, I'll get some reward. I do my averos, I'll get some punishment. This world, next world, whatever it'll be. The Kabbalah is teaching a very different orientation. It's not just about I did something good, so I'll get something good. I did something bad, I'll get something bad. Rather, on some level, I affect the universe. Now, maybe because I'm so small, I'm just the one person, the effect might be relatively imperceptible. On the other hand, the universe is pretty big, all of the heavenly world. So it might very well be the little thing I did here may have had repercussions of billions and billions and billions of malachim, whatever. We don't even know at that point how it gets magnified. But the point is, it just reminds us how powerful we are, how much we do make a difference. Our deeds make a difference to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And as a result, once you are aware of what you can do, that creates a responsibility to do it. You see? If I thought I was a nothing, if I thought my actions didn't make a difference, if I thought the only consequences of even my sins is I'll go to hell, so I might make a judgment, although that's pretty stupid anyway, but I might make a judgment. All right, if I want to go to hell, that's my business. even though that's pretty stupid judgment, even on the most superficial level, because hell is not so good. But the point is, Kabbalah is teaching a different orientation. It's not only about me. I'm affecting the spiritual dynamics of a universe. And at that point, I have a little bit of a responsibility not to do that. And therefore, Kabbalah really reminds a person of how powerful you are and how important your deeds are and how much you make a difference. Yeah.
Now that we've finished these 8 steps, how exactly is this not just a detailing of the Midah of Chesed Avraham, the way that we reflect or emulate that Midah is by doing Chesed to other people?
Well, you run into a problem. Again, I'm not planning on chazering the Torah Devorah after we eventually finish it. We spent a very long time. This is why there are a lot of Torah Devorah shiurim on the internet. This may be the longest one. I don't say it's the best one. God forbid I don't make any credit. But the longest one it may very well be, because we've been going on quite a long time. And one of the issues that you're going to face is that if you look at the very famous first parak, which is by far the most famous and the most widely studied. In fact, the reason why a lot of the Talmud Devorah shiurim online are short is because they only do the first parak, and the like is the midah of Keser, the 13 midos of Rachamim of Keser. Now, all 13, were different aspects of Chesed. So you're going to get a real problem, conceptual problem. What exactly is the difference with what I'm accomplishing when I emulate the 13 midos of Rachamim of Keser versus the 8 chasadim in Chesed? It is a very good question. I mean, for some reason, the Ramak subsumed these 8 levels under Chesed and not under the 13 midos of Keser. So that's going to be a conceptual problem. I mean, part of why it's a very difficult question to answer is because ultimately even the Gevuros come from the Chasadim, meaning everything comes from Keser. And if Keser is primarily the 13 midos of Rachamim and Chesed, that means everything is Rachamim and Chesed. But then you're singling out a sphera of Chesed, right, which is differentiated. So you're kind of highlighting how are you machalek between the kloliistic Chesed that emerges from Keser and the particularistic manifestation of Chesed that emerges in the sphera of Chesed? It's a very, very good question. So if and when we chazer the Talmud Devorah, well, something to think about. Okay, but it is a good question. Okay, so I want to talk about a little bit of time left over. I want to talk about Tainus Esther tomorrow, and two interesting points about Tainus Esther. Point number one is Tainus Esther is not Medina de Gemara. The observance of a fast of Esther as an annual event. I don't mean the one in the Megillah, but as an annual observance of the fast of Esther dates from the time of the Gaonim. It is a post-Talmudic fast. That's point number one to keep in mind, which is why it is even more Mekel than Asar B'Teve, Shiva Asar B'Tamas, and Som Gedalia, because although those are called minor fast days in the sense that we are Mekel on them as well, but this is even more Mekel because this is not even Medina de Gemara. That's point number one. Point number two that's interesting is that there was a time in which the 13th of Adar, now this year, because of Shabbos, we're not fasting on the 13th of Adar, but normally Tainus Esther is the 13th of Adar, was not only not a fast day, it was a holiday in which you were not allowed to fast. In the work of the Tanoim called Megillas Tainus, which is a historical listing of days that you're not allowed to fast because they were festive, the 13th of Adar is called Yom Nikanor, the day of Nikanor. Now, Nikanor was one of Antiochus's generals, and in the book of the Maccabees, actually Megillas Tainus also gives you the story, it is recorded that at one point in these battles, he was engaged in a siege against Jerusalem, and there was a great, great danger. He was miraculously defeated on the 13th of Adar. Again, we never know exactly what years this is, but it was during the Maccabean revolt and maybe some years afterwards. And because of this, the Chachamim were koveya that the 13th, nothing to do with Purim, the 13th of Adar should be celebrated as a great holiday called Nicanor's Day. By the way, don't confuse this. There's another Nicanor who was Jewish. The gates, the main gate of the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, of the Azara, is called Shar Nicanor, the gates of Nicanor. Now, Nicanor was a Jewish man, albeit with a Greek name, who purchased those gates, and they were made in Mitzrayim, a burnished copper that resembled gold. And when they were bringing them back from Egypt by the sea, by a sea route, there was a great storm, and the ship almost sunk, and they had to throw excess cargo over, so they threw those gates, or those doors, those big doors, over the side of the boat. And miraculously, when they came to Eretz Yisrael, those doors were floating along with the ship. And therefore, even though normally we prefer to have golden gates rather than copper gates, but the Gemara says, since there was a miracle that happened to those gates, they were given a special chashivas. So those are called the gates of Nicanor. Now that Nicanor is Jewish. Don't confuse Shari Nicanor or Shar Nicanor with Yom Nicanor. Yom Nicanor, which is the holiday of the 13th of Adar, is referring to a Syrian general who was killed on the 13th of Adar, and therefore it was celebrated as a Yom Tov. So the question becomes, how can the Gaonim be misaken a fast day on a day that Megillas Tainus says you're not allowed to fast because it's Yom Nicanor? And why don't we celebrate Yom Nicanor today? So the short answer is that this depends on a big question, but the Gemara's maskana is that all of the extra holidays in Megillat Tainus became batel with the destruction of the Second Temple. There were many, many holidays, mainly Hasmonean victories of different types. Hanukkah is the only one that survived, but there were many, many, many battles, and many of them were given separate one-day holidays to commemorate. And that became batel after the Churban because we no longer benefited from those Yom Tovim. So as a result, it would have been impossible to have a Tainus Esther during the Second Temple, because during the Second Temple, the 13th of Adar was Yom Nicanor. But after the Churban, when Megillas Tainus was batel, there's no longer an Isser to fast, albeit there wasn't a Tainus either, but by the Gainim they said, let's have a Tainus Esther. Right? So that's the second point, the inverse relationship between Yom Nicanor, which is a day you're not allowed to fast, and Tainus Esther. The third point is, there is a big machlokes rishonim as to what is the origin. I mean, yes, historically it's from the Gaonim, but what is Tainus Esther based on? According to most, and this is the Pashat Pshat, well, it's a commemoration of the fast that Esther and Mordechai decreed, right? When Mordechai told Esther about Haman's Gezerah, so Esther said right away, gather all the Jews of Shushan, remember it's only in Shushan, and they should fast for 3 days. They ate at night, and then I will go to the Melech. So Esther decreed a 3-day fast, and lezecher, that fast, we have Tainus Esther. Now, if that's the case, though, there are 2 things to keep in mind. Number 1, Esther's fast was 3 days. We only do it once. Okay, we can understand that. The Chachamim didn't want to make it too hard. But number 2, when did Esther have that 3-day fast? We don't realize, unless you study the Megillah carefully, how much Pesach is involved in the Purim story. Esther's fast was the 13th, the 14th, the 15th of Nisan. They ate at night, but on the day, the first day of Pesach, they fasted. Esther went into Achashverosh on the first day of Pesach. And that's when she had her first Mishnah. That night, the king couldn't sleep. The next morning, Haman was leading Mordechai. And there was the second banquet. So when was Haman killed? Haman was not killed on Purim. Haman was killed the second day of Pesach, 11 months before. We still had the problem with the war and having to fight our enemies, etc. But Haman was killed the second day of Pesach. That is why some Hasidim have a minhag that they sing Shoshanas Yaakov on the second day of Pesach, which in Eretz Yisrael is Chol HaMoed, and they even eat a kosher LePesach Haman Tashim. I wonder how that would taste, but I suppose, why not? You can make, unless you eat gebrach. If you actually eat gebrach, you'd have difficulty with it. Okay, whatever. But, so I don't know. Most Hasidim wouldn't be able to have a kosher LePesach Haman Tashim because the filling would be sharuya, but okay. Alrighty. So that's the one thing. So according to this, the fast that we have is Lezecher Esther's fast. It's 1 day instead of 3 days. And we don't do it in Nisan because we don't want to fast in Nisan. So we move it Samach Lepurim. So it doesn't really fit the chronology at all. But still, most actually say that Tainus Esther is Lezecher the 3 days of that fast. However, there are other Rishonim that give a different origin, based on a Yerushalmi, that this is actually commemorating an unrecorded fast, that the days that Jews went into battle to defend their lives, they would fast, asking Hashem for rachamim. Now that's a big chiddush. You'd figure a soldier, before he goes into battle, would like to have a good breakfast. In a macabre way, because it may be his last meal, but hopefully not. But also you want to be strong. You don't want to be famishing away when you have to fight an enemy. And yet the old minhag of Klal Yisrael was that the soldiers would fast before they would go into battle. And therefore the 13th of Adar was a Yom Tainus, even though it doesn't say it in the Megillah. And therefore Tainus Esther is a commemoration of the fast of the Chayolim on Yud Gimel Adar. Right? So there's the Machlokas Rishonim. What is the origin of Tainus Esther? Now, normally, if you live outside of Yerushalayim, and Tainus Esther is on Yud Gimel, so the fast is a little longer because you're not supposed to break the fast until after you hear Megillah. So it goes into the night. One of the many, many benefits of living in Yerushalayim is that since we don't keep Purim till the 15th, and Tainus Esther is still the 13th, so we don't have that problem. Tainus Esther is over. There's no Megillah reading. After Ma'ariv, we can already eat. And then we have a whole day to prepare for Purim the next night. But this year, Bein Kach u'Bein Kach, we're not fasting on the 13th of Adar. We're fasting on Thursday. Why is that so? Because the 14th of Adar is Sunday. And that would mean that the 13th of Adar is Shabbos, so we don't fast on Shabbos. And we don't fast on Friday, except for Asar B'Teves, because we also don't want to enter Shabbos hungry and uncomfortable. So Memela, where the 13th of Adar is Shabbos, the Tainus is brought earlier to Thursday. Okay? So here's the kasha. Even when the 9th of Av is on Shabbos, so we don't fast on Shabbos, except for Yom Kippur. So when do we observe the fast of the 9th of Av? Sunday. Right? Saturday night, Sunday. Why are we ma'acher and not maktim? So the Gemara says that when it comes to perennials, when it comes to tragedy, when it comes to sadness, when it comes to catastrophe, we try to push it off as much as we can instead of bringing it on early. And that is the Yesod HaDevarim, that whenever you have a fast that you don't do on Shabbos, you're not makdim the fast, you're ma'acher the fast. Right, except for Yom Kippur, where you actually do fast on Shabbos. So the kasha is, why is it that Tainus Esther, b'dafka, we do it early, and we don't do it afterwards? Now, you might say, well, maybe it doesn't make so much sense to have Tainus Esther after Purim, because Tainus Esther b'dafka was something that was pre-Purim. Could be. It could be that the svara, that it has to precede Purim, is so strong that that's going to override the issue of ma'acher. But the Shemesh Shmuel gives such a really simple teretz that once you have the teretz, you're going to wonder how you ever had the kasha. He says, when you look at a fast like Tisha B'Av, Tisha B'Av is a fast that is commemorating a tragedy, commemorating a calamity. It is a mourning over the Chorban Beis HaMikdash. It is the saddest day of the year. So Memela, Chazal say, when it comes to fast days that commemorate tragedy, we push it off. We don't want to bring sadness into our lives earlier than we have to. Tainus Esther is exactly the opposite. Whatever it's commemorating, whether it's commemorating Esther's 3-day fast, or whether it's commemorating the unrecorded fast of the soldiers on the 13th, it is not a fast of tragedy. It is not a fast of catastrophe. It's a fast in which Hashem answered our prayers. Hashem listened to our tefillas. Hashem gave us Yeshua, and when we fast, it's to remind us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Shaimeya when we turn to Him b'leiv shalom. In other words, the emotion of Tainus, what is to be sad about it? I mean, other than the sorrows we're going through, I understand. But as a Tainus Esther, what is sad about Tainus Esther? We fasted and we won. So Memela, the Shemesh Shmuel says very pashut. The taina of the Gemara that we don't want to bring on tragedy early, and that's why the 9th of Av is late, only applies to a fast day of calamity. But a fast day that there was a triumph and a victory, bring it on. Let it be early. So in addition to the intrinsic svara that Tainus Esther has to precede Purim, you're not going to do it after Purim, even conceptually there is nothing wrong with that. So this is a very strange fast day, really, because we always associate every fast day, maybe not Yom Kippur, but even Yom Kippur to some degree, but certainly the fast days commemorating the Chorban, the 10th of Teves, Tzom Gedalia, which was after the Chorban, but the assassination of Gedalia, Shiva B'Tammuz, there's sadness, there's tragedy. Something bad happened on those days, and we mourn. Tainus Esther has no shaychus to any type of avelis whatsoever. The concept of fasting is to remind us that when we turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'leiv shalom, He answers our prayers. We are, of course, in a time where, a Yid always needs Rachamei Shemayim. There's never a time where that's not needed, but here it's more begoloi, revealed that we need it as we're going through a difficult situation. And the words of Shoshanis Yaakov that we're going to sing should always be in our heads. L'hidia shekol kevecha lo yevaishav lo yikomu l'netzach kol ha'chaysim bach. That l'hidia, you are making known to us that all those who hope in you shall not be ashamed, shall not be humiliated. Shuasam ha'isa l'netzach. You have been their salvation for eternity. V'sikvasam b'chol dor v'dor. And you have been their hope in every generation. So when you say the words or sing the words this year, think about what those words mean. And that's really the message of Tainus Esther itself. Yeah. I'm sorry, why don't you do what? Oh, okay, so that's a chiddush. Well, okay, l'maisa asara b'teves, you mean the theoretical halacha of the Avudraham, that if asara b'teves would be on Shabbos, that we would fast. But that's theoretical, though. Keep in mind, it's theoretical. Under the calendar, it can never happen.
This year we went into Shabbos.
No, that's a different. Okay, but that's not. Yeah, but that's not doing it early. That's doing it on time. You're combining two different things. When we fasted on Friday, that was not because Asar B'Teves was on Shabbos. When Asar B'Teves is on Friday, we fast on Friday. Now that's still a kasha, but it has nothing to do with not bringing it on early. We didn't bring it on early. We were fasting on the 10th of Teves. But you are correct that the 10th of Teves is unusual. The Avudraham actually says that if it would fall out on Shabbos, which it cannot, so this is an untestable proposition, but if it would fall out on Shabbos, we would fast, even though the calendar does not allow that. And if it falls out on Friday, we do fast, but it's the correct date. We're not doing it early or whatever it is. So again, there are good reasons for this. I mean, the Chassam Sofer says that Asara B'Teves is the Yom Hadin for the Beis HaMikdash. It's like God is deciding if there'll be a Beis HaMikdash this year. So as a Yom Hadin, it's like Yom Kippur, we would fast. Yeah.
For in the story of Purim in Esther's 3-day fast, how do we know that's mutter? I mean, to not eat or drink for 3 days straight.
No. So the answer was that it was not a 24-hour fast. It was like Lahavdil, like Ramadan. They fasted during the day, and they ate at night. So therefore, there was no sakana. I mean, it's hard to fast 3 days, even if you're eating at night. But it was mutter, and that's why they were not mevatel the mitzvah of Pesach. Because if you're going to tell me they fasted, not only would there be an avera to fast on Pesach as Yom Tov, but they would be mevatel the mitzvah d'oraisa of matzah, morer, right? So the answer is they had a seder even then.
You wouldn't miss out the Sudas Shal Yom.
What?
You wouldn't miss out the Shal Yom.
Yeah. So again, remember, I mean, Mordechai was a navi. I mean, they were still neviim in those days, so it was shaykh to have prophetic suspension of these rules on a one-time basis. Okay, so everyone should have a good fast tomorrow. B'ezras Hashem should also remind us that Hashem is a Shemea Tefillah.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.